Hello, I'm Dana Beal, and I'm speaking to you on my podcast and YouTube channel, Project Illumination. And I'm really excited today because I have a guest, Sandra Ford Walston. Hi, Sandra.
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you as always. Um, Before I tell you more about Sandra Ford Walston, I want to, for those that may not know me, I'm the author of the book, The Illuminated Workplace. And I have been a speaker all over the United States and Canada and international speaker on bringing light and love to the world and the workplace and shining that energy and emanating a loving, universal loving energy to heal relationships and rebuild relationships. So today we're going to be talking with Sandra Ford Walston on her subject of courage, a subject I think that is really needed right now. So again, Sandra, so nice to have you here, and I'm going to read a little bit a bio about you. So would that be a good way to start?
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, Sandra is a global speaker. Sandra is Sandra Ford Walston, known as the Courage Expert. She says she has one job: to teach people how to claim their courage. For over 29 years, she's been a speaker, a certified coach, a trainer, and the author of 3 books on feminine courage, everyday courage, and non-gender courageous leadership. She helps professionals and individuals leap forward in their career and personal lives by illuminating the power of courage. Sandra has written 3 books: Courage, the Heart and Spirit of Every Woman, Reclaiming the Forgotten Virtue. I love that word, virtue. The Courage Difference at Work, a unique success guide for women. And Face It, 12 courageous actions that bring success at work and beyond. So you have quite a career, quite a long history of helping people and speaking and doing, I imagine, workshops as well as speaking engagements with your books on courage. So to just start out before we really get into too many other questions, I wanted to ask you, what is your definition of courage from your 30 years of unique research?
Yeah, it just about killed me. I sometimes wonder, how did I get the courage to do that?
Exactly.
But yeah, what I'm on a mission to do is to awaken people to the benefits and of what courage really is. And courage, I go on medieval Old French courage, meaning heart and spirit.
Mhm.
So what happens is that when we come from our heart and spirit, we build a reservoir of courage. And however, conversely, our culture, this is like, oh gosh, really? Our culture tends to want to make courage about fear, create a duality, courage or fear. Fear is a creation of the ego, and fear will kill courage. Also, courage, the duality of courage and not only courage and fear, but courage that is lost to one's true self. So it ends up being looking like the amazing, the amazing, the tragic, the scandalous, and big things. Physical courage. My work is not on physical courage. My work is on how you can build a reservoir of courage in your heart.
Oh. Well, that resonates with me, Sandra. You know, my book and my work is a lot about the ego and finding your true self by seeing the filters and the shadows and letting that true courage from within, what you're describing, not just a performance of being mighty, but true courage. And could you elaborate on that? What would be some examples maybe of someone demonstrating courage?
Yes, one of the biggest ones that I found over the 30 years is the issue of speaking up. There, what evolved as a certified coach, what evolved for me was the interest of linguistics, the power of linguistics. So people tend to, and it crosses the board, I don't care how educated you are or what your title is, that linguistics ends up playing a key role in being able to express myself. So what do I mean by that?
Yeah.
So when I find myself understanding something that somebody's talking about, maybe it's a topic that I don't know anything about, but my ego, my chatter is going, well, don't speak up because you're going to look stupid, don't say anything. As compared to what I came up with linguistics is, and this is an example, I would say something like this. Dana, this takes a lot of courage for me to ask you about your platform of your book because I haven't finished reading it. And I'd like for you to tell me what I'm missing about your book at this stage. So that shows that I'm being vulnerable to expose to you that one, I haven't finished your book, and two, I'm not understanding a particular section. And what I have found over my years is that people their ears perk up when I say, this takes a lot of courage for me to, I could even say this, it takes a lot of courage for me to be vulnerable to speak, blah, blah, blah. When that happens, it's like people's ears kind of perk up and go, wow, this is a big deal to her. She's really being vulnerable. Let me listen. And the listening escalates to where they're really listening to what I'm saying. So it's like a filter that comes through that will bridge with the group when I show my vulnerability and I speak in a linguistic term. Does that make sense, Dana?
Yes, and you know what? Before you even finished it, I was thinking what you're describing is truly a bridge to others, because
Yes.
it's interesting because even though you and I, we don't know each other well, although we know each other really 30 years, we've maintained our connections with one another. And even though we use some different terminology, we share so many similar, we're on the same page. Because I talk about being vulnerable and being willing to listen and being willing. I say that true leaders and actually authentic people are willing to say they don't know.
Yes.
That takes courage because in our society, everyone wants to look really great and really smart. And that's a false self. And the authentic
Exactly.
self can be willing to really, be vulnerable.
Mhm.
Well, there's whole books written about vulnerability, and Brene Brown, I'm sure you've probably read her. If she talks
No,
about being, oh, well, you'd like it because it fits
no,
right.
I'm actually not into her work.
Oh, she talks about being vulnerable.
Mhm.
So I know that your work has some basic virtues, and we want virtuous leaders, and we all want to be virtuous. Could you maybe describe to us some of the main virtues that you would say are part of being courageous?
Well, that's a little confusing for me because
Okay.
in one of my presentations, I actually have a list from an author of virtues, and
Okay.
they're always one word.
Mhm.
So compassionate, uh, integrity. What would be a couple for you that you would pick out?
Well,
Uh,
integrity would be
yeah,
one. Yeah,
honesty.
yeah, honesty, dedication, vision, um, just all those kind of words.
Well,
So
it's interesting
tell
because
me
those are
about
probably,
yours.
well, so your question was about virtues. Courage would be on that list,
Oh,
single
okay.
word. So courage is not about the issues, the rest of the virtues. It stands in its own self. Actually, Aristotle said courage is the first of the virtues, making all the other virtues possible.
Hmm. That makes sense.
So I always think of an umbrella, an umbrella, you know a lot about where you live,
Yeah,
umbrellas.
exactly.
There's
Seattle.
always something on the top of the umbrella that holds it, in place. It could be very decorative or whatever. And then all the spokes that come out. I always picture those spokes and stuff as different virtues, but at the top holding it is courage.
Mhm.
So when Aristotle said courage is the first of the virtues, making all the other virtues possible, that really pretty much says it. So to me, the value, so we can't commingle courage and virtues. Virtues stand
Okay. Okay.
independently of each other. Uh, but what happens so much with courage is that people get it confused. Like I said, it's not about the duality of courage and fear.
Right.
Courage or what would be another example? Well, it'll come to me. One of the things about courage is that's so important, and that would be on our list of virtues is grace. You know,
Mm.
Dana, you have grace. You have what I
Oh,
call is a higher integral level of courage consciousness. Let me say
thank
that
you.
again. A higher integral level of courage conscious example. Yes, you have it, but an example of a phrase would be where courage meets grace.
Mm.
And so I'm an 11th hour hospice volunteer, and I've been doing it for 14 years. And I can see at the decline of somebody's life how they're filled with resentment, anger, bitterness, and that's what's filled their spirit. A lot of times because their home life, usually, because of their home life. But then there's that person where is so centered in my heart, my hands over my heart in prayer, centered in peace and calmness. And you can just see the difference, that there is not that energy with the person who's centered and at peace and
Mhm.
welcoming their last breath.
Oh, that's so beautiful. What's sad is because I haven't been a hospice volunteer, and the only person I've been witness to was her dying was my mother, and she had grace. I think it's very sad to hear that many people have anger and
Resentment.
resentment on their
Well, that's
deathbed.
why to claim your courage now, to go back to be able
Oh,
to look at how you can transfer that energy. So if there's resentment, you want to clear that up, and it takes vulnerability to go in and do that with someone or something. And they're also attached to old stories. It's like somebody clipped one of my wings when I was a child, and so
oh,
therefore I carry an energy. So I have an example of a coaching client who is a very well-known architect. And he said, Sandra, I realize now that for me, what happened is that someone clipping my wings is that I said the phrase of I've always been consistently shy. He says, and that's what I've carried. That's been my whole energy. And
story.
therefore I don't get promoted. Therefore somebody doesn't ask me, I'm not a good marketing person. I don't speak up, but there was that energy that he was attached to. He says, once I release that, Sandra, thanks to you, a whole new energy field opened up for
Oh,
me.
that this is really, really powerful. I in my work, I work with people on discovering what their stories are. And I say that we have in our lives, we create really starting as a child, this story, and we're the star of it. And we can play out all these different actions with different characters in our lives. But the minute we realize we're making it all up, we can let go and we can feel forgiveness. We can be vulnerable. We can be at peace. And it is sad to me to hear that there are people that go to their deathbed still caught, trapped in these stories of resentment and suffering and probably martyrdom and all of those feelings that I see people, deal with and I've dealt with. And your point that gave me chills is if we understand that, we can change it now.
That's
Now's the
right.
time to
Yeah,
discover. We create our own story, and we
yeah,
have a new moment, every moment to change our story if we want to, like your description of the person that was shy.
yeah, yeah. That's why I always say to people, um, just to say with me, I'll say it one time and then I'll ask the group to say it again. I am unwilling to sell my soul.
Oh,
Say it again with me. I am unwilling to sell my soul.
that is, oh, that's really kind of at the root of all of this because without being political, it's hard not to be in this day and age. I am seeing so many people willing to sell their soul. And I
Mhm.
think how are they going to, where are they going to fall on the side in history? How are they going to feel on their deathbed? And
Mhm.
the our soul, we're here to be unified with our soul, to be our true self at this time, I believe. And selling your soul is, well, selling your soul to the devil. You're giving
Mhm.
up your own power.
Yeah.
And it's really for some kind of validation or money or power that people do this.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
think
add
it's
to that.
important to live an indelible mark of love on each person's life that you come across.
Oh, you say such beautiful words. Yes, an indelible mark of love. That is such a I talk to my audiences about being love, being universal love. I don't mean the sentiment. And then the universal love, the connection to a greater consciousness, the connection to that we are all interconnected. And then emanate that wherever you go. And um, so many people say, what can I do to make a difference in the world? In every small way, you can leave an indelible print, like you just said, with
But what
every moment.
happens? Yeah. But what happens, what I've researched is that we're stuck on automatic. We just get caught doing the same thing over and over. And it takes courage to declare. And as a linguistics coach, declaration is a very powerful word. I have it, I call it DCI, a declaration of courageous intention. And so we get stuck on automatic, that same story that we're talking about, when the architect said, I'm painfully shy. That's my aura, Sandra. I'm painfully shy. And we worked on it. And yes, he was an introvert and he wasn't a forceful personality type. So I'm not asking him to go in there, knock him out, just go be somebody different. No, but to release that energy if we're someone, as you
Mhm.
said, and we were talking, cut what I use if the wing has been cut
Yeah,
and that becomes, their story.
yes. Um, I believe, I don't know, I'm going to ask you about this. I believe that part of courage is having trust, trust in something greater than the ego or the story. And when you're present, you can let go of a lot of those worries and that are part of the story. And in my life, things have just come into my life unexpectedly and held me up. And, but it always took courage to be in that place, to take the step forward, to do the next thing. But my courage comes from a sense that I am part of something greater than just my story. Do you have any thoughts about trust? Is that any part of your research?
Well, that would be that. No, it's not. I know
Hmm.
there is a person out there, I don't recall the author's name, that wrote a lot about trust, but I'm sure trust would be on that list that I use of
Oh,
virtues.
of
No,
virtues, yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
it would be on there. But I have found that when you do come into courage, that there is a direct correlation between your success quotient and your courage quotient. And I don't mean success as to my title or how much money I make or whatever, but just your feelings in your life, so that when your time comes, and we never know when that's going to be,
Right.
that you will not be filled with resentment, that there will be peace, what you feel. But
Yeah.
so many times we're on automatic, and self-doubt comes in. Couple of
Mhm.
courage killers are conformity and complacency. You know,
Yep.
actually, there ended up being 12 courage cousins, and I don't know how this happened, but they all start with a C. But so the example of complacency and conformity are two out of that list.
Ah,
Yeah,
well, yeah, conformity is a big one. Not wanting to
yeah,
be step out of what everyone else is doing. That
right.
takes courage to step out. I've witnessed some people in the workplace and in our political world that have been willing to step out. But
Yeah.
when I listen to you, your words are so clear and it's such a profound message to really explain courage.
Well,
And
thank you.
well, it's wonderful. The work you've done is wonderful and it's needed. People need to hear these words. I also wonder, because I've had my own experiences, I wonder if in your 30 years of research, has anything just knocked you off your feet regarding
Yes, want
courage?
to go. Yes. Um, there's one story. So here I started writing my first book, researching, did a book proposal, sent it to Random House. I got picked up by Random House. They sent me on a national book tour.
That's so
I
impressive.
I I knew and Dana, I knew everything. I
Ah,
knew everything about courage. That first book represented 5 years, maybe 6 years of research, but I knew everything
Yeah.
about courage. So they sent me on
I see where this is going.
sent me on a national book tour, and then the top executive international women of IBM called me to bring me out to New York to speak at their conference. So I went and I gave my presentation, and they said you can stay the next day if you'd like to for the rest of the conference. I said I'd love to stay and hear the speakers, be invited to attend the rest of the conference. And so I was standing someplace off stage or whatever, and this woman walked in very gently, came up to me, and she said, so you can see, I'll never forget this. She said to me, don't you think that first you must be willing to give yourself permission to claim your courage? Knocked me back on my heels.
Wow.
And I said, that was it. I thought, I don't have the power over anybody. That was my ego thinking, I knew everything. I could change everybody. Everybody will want courage.
Wow.
Everybody will get it. Everybody's heart will be open. I'm a magician. And when she said that, don't you think you must be willing to give yourself permission? I realized that only you can give yourself permission to decide whether or not you want to claim your courage. No matter how many books I've written, hundreds of articles, blah, 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 only you can decide when you're ready
Yeah.
to fulfill your heart with courage.
Yes. Well, that's a beautiful illustration and a vulnerability to share that with us. And I have had similar steps in my journey.
Sure.
At times thinking I knew more than I knew, or I knew it. I think what was for me in the beginning, when you're out there with so many people asking you questions in the beginning, it's just part of the evolution. You start to realize that what you're teaching, you're also learning yourself. And you will, for me, that drew experiences to me that in, different ways knocked me off my feet. Because my first book was The Tragedy in the Workplace.
Yeah, I
Was the
remember.
title. Yeah, that's when you and I first met. Well,
Yes.
we've never met in person, but we met
Right.
somehow. We haven't figured that out yet. But it took me a while to really, in a way, claim what I was doing from an authentic point of view. And what happened to me is I had a real life job for a while. I took a job as a marketing director for a big medical organization here. On and off, I've worked in the workplace. I've been a consultant, and I have been just an independent author speaker. But I had this job where I had what I had described in my book and had experienced, or not really experienced, had heard it from all my clients about the bully boss, or the boss that was, really operating using the fear-based management. And I, for the first time, experienced my feeling of how painful it is to work for somebody where you have an image of yourself and he's destroying it. And so that took me courage to see it and be willing to step out courageously and make changes and do what I needed with my life. But it then helped me understand why it's hard to have courage when your livelihood or your image, your role, all the things that we identify as on an ego level, to be able to go in your heart and to be able to speak directly to the situation. And I mean, there have been times when I felt like I was walking the plank.
Yeah.
My courage came through, and even if it was difficult, it helped me not only for myself, but for my consulting jobs, my speaking engagements, to know really what people are suffering in the workplace, specifically, and that to get out of it, the courage it takes.
But it's very hard for people to be present, in that moment, to be able to keep that. I mean, it triggers an example. I was living in West LA, and I was started up working for a bank that was a startup. And my boss, who happened to be the chairman of the board, said, Sandra, I want you to go out and make this call in Century City. And I said, I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, why is he sitting me? I don't know anything about banking. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but I had my briefcase and that. So I go to this office and I go in and the receptionist says, 1 minute. And so this man comes out in a very, very dressed suit and very chic and I looked nice too and had my briefcase. And he said, I gave him my business card and he looked at my business card. Then he looked at me and then he looked at my business card. Now my business card said basically bottom line rookie. I don't remember what it said, but it was no title. And he looked at it again and he says, well, usually I only meet with somebody that's at least president, nothing below. So I came in, yeah. I opened up my folder to take notes and he starts pontificating about his business and what he's going to transfer to us and how it's going to be so great and we'll be so lucky to have him in the bank. And I'm sitting there taking notes. And so he said, he says, so what do you think? And I said, well, as you can see, I've taken notes and I'm going to go back and talk to my boss. And he slams his hand down on his desk and he said, no, you're going to tell me right now what it is you're going to do. Are you going to take this business or not? I folded up my binder, put it in my briefcase, stood up and said, this will not work for us.
Wow. Well,
I didn't know if it was a good piece of business or not. And I go to the elevator and he follows me out, Dana, and then whispers in my ear, this is a small town. And I'm thinking, Los Angeles? small town. So the key thing is I have to go back to the bank and I call my boss and I said, that's courage, but now what I'm about to say is also courage. I said, well, Joel, you're either going to fire me or you're going to love me. And he said, let's hear it. So I start telling him the story. He goes, hold on. I've got the president and the vice president in my office. I want them to hear it. So I'm sweating, so I start telling the story again and they just laugh and they said, you did the right thing.
wow, that's so great.
But I could have been fired.
Yes.
I didn't know. But I was determined. I didn't like his attitude and I didn't have a good vibe, in the whole situation. So that's courage in place at the moment. That's hard.
Yes, it's very hard. I hear you. And so what it gives me, and I am sure you, when we're working with people, the understanding of how hard it is, but they can get to that reservoir of courage with, discovering it within. And that always results in, even if it looks painful at the time, even if it looks, this could be catastrophic, it ultimately turns out to be the best thing when you stick with your heart, your soul, and as you describe, courage.
Yeah. So when you go home at night, you look in the mirror and you're proud of who you are.
Exactly.
Or maybe you need to go back the next day and say, hey, I need to confess here. Confessing is a cousin to courage.
Yes.
I need to confess here. And this takes courage for me to share this with you. But I screwed up yesterday. We were talking about that and I didn't get it. And I screwed up. And are you willing to accept my apology? So it keeps things clean.
Yes.
As you very well know in your work.
Yes.
So,
that is such a good example.
So those are examples of how courage is an abstract. All virtues are an abstract. Mm-hmm. So I try to ground them into the concrete.
Yes. Oh, that's a good way to put it. And since courage is the foremost one that allows all the other virtues to emerge, understanding courage is understanding and connecting with our own inner courage.
Yes.
It's rewarding. Like you said, you can look yourself in the mirror at night. Yeah. And no matter what it looks like superficially for a little while, you in your heart know that
I stood in my true self.
You stood in your true self. Well, Sandra, I could actually sit here and talk for hours about the many, many stories and the many clients that I have had that are so fearful in their workplace. And one of the things I've taught them, and then we're going to wrap this up, but you probably will, I think you'll agree with this. I've taught people to understand your job is not your identity. It's not your true identity. It's just a role you're playing.
Right.
But while you're in it, can feel very fearful. But Courage is,
In closing, I guess I would love for your listeners to take this one sentence. They could write it down. What would you do right now if you had unlimited courage?
mm,
What would you do right now if you had unlimited courage? And everybody has one.
yes, yes. Well, I hope everybody, listeners, I hope you're writing that down and that you recognize you do have unlimited courage and the sky's the limit. You can go out there and create and be and do who you really, what your soul really wants you to do and not be limited with stories. So, Sandra, I know you've got books that can be found on Amazon. And what are other ways people, if somebody wants to contact you for a consulting or coaching, how do
You
they?
know, the best way, and it's interesting because I met a man the other day who said the same thing. I was like, wow, he just feels the same way. LinkedIn, hook up with me on
Oh,
LinkedIn.
yeah,
Yeah.
I follow you on LinkedIn. So, yeah, that's a good place.
Yes.
So, Sandra, it's been a pleasure. And someday, one of these days, yes, one of these days we're going to meet in person. Um, it would just be a joy to actually physically sit down and have a cup of coffee with you or a meal. But I really thank you for being here today. It feels almost like we're in the same room.
Yeah, it does to me, and I'm honored to be with you and appreciate so much you finding value in my work and blessing me with this time.
Well, thank you for blessing me with your time. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.